Hey everybody, Eugene Mulero with Transport Topics, and I'm here with my friend Kellie Mejdrich, transportation reporter at CQ Local. We're here to talk about the highway bill, which the House is expected to take up this week. And Kellie, the Rules Committee is meeting today, and they have what I would say is an unusual setup for treating the highway bill treatment for the floor. Could you talk a little bit about that? Because I see that they not only have the House version, but a Senate version teed up.
So on Monday, today, they're going to meet to discuss the rule for floor debate for the highway bill.
Yeah.
Again, the Rules Committee is kind of taking the first step toward a conference with the Senate on its bill that they passed in the end of July. We're going to have the Senate bill as a shell. The Senate, again, contains about 3 years of funding for surface transportation.
And it authorizes 6 years.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then the House is going to insert their policy from a markup in late October. And so tonight they meet to discuss general debate rules. But later in the week, on Tuesday, tomorrow, they're going to discuss the rule for amendments. There have been over 250 amendments filed to both the House and Senate legislation. And the Rules Committee tomorrow is going to be the first chance that we see what House leadership is really going to consider grounds for actual discussion on the floor. Obviously, they can't include all 250 amendments in their process on the floor, or it could take forever. And not only that, but there are also amendments that both sides of the aisle consider potentially devastating for a highway bill if they were to be included in the legislation. So leadership is really keeping kind of a tight grip on what exactly is going to be included and allowed to be discussed on the floor in the hopes that they can advance the legislation to the point that they have a conference with the Senate.
And when I see a bill get a reaction, gets the so many amendments proposed to it, I only see that when it comes to a defense policy bill, must pass legislation. So this tells me that they're really serious, and the word is out that this is going to be a bill that's going to move out of the House. Is that what you're hearing?
Yeah, this is something that's similar to what we saw with the committee markup of the House Transportation Bill. There was a large number of amendments we saw at committee, but this is even bigger because the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee Chairman Bill Schuster has called for amendments to the transportation provisions in the House bill, but has also set an open amendment process, at least at the Rules Committee level, for the Senate bill. So what you'll see is a lot of transportation-related amendments are going to be considered on the House side, but on the Senate, there's quite a larger amount of legislation that could be fair game to be considered for the Senate bill. So clearly lawmakers are taking this seriously. Their staff is working hard to get a lot of amendments at least up for consideration at the Rules Committee level. Now, what actually makes it to the floor is anyone's guess at this point, but we're going to get more details on that tonight.
And we'll get into a little bit about what the bill has, especially the House bill. But one amendment that is, going to be floated around is by Congressman Reed Ribble of Wisconsin, and my understanding is that that amendment is going to look to increase the weight limits for trucks. So right now, to bring it to 91,000 nationwide. What are you hearing about that amendment, Reed Ribble's efforts on that?
So that amendment has been highly anticipated. We were looking for it at the committee markup. Didn't see it. Now what we hear is this is potentially going to be a floor amendment. An increase in the gross vehicle weight limit is something that's been sought by the industry for a long time. And that is something that has a lot of support from representatives that have heavy trucking industry.
Yeah.
But safety advocates are very concerned about that amendment, and they don't want to see it become part of the legislation. And so we will probably see that come up at the floor level. But again, that depends on whether it gets sanctioned for consideration by the committee on Tuesday.
Yep, exactly. And in conversations with Ribble's office last week, they gave me the impression that they're very aggressive in moving this amendment, which, as you know, he introduced as legislation earlier this year.
And just one of several trucking provisions that we're going to be seeing in the highway bill,
That's
right?
right, yeah. There's the House version has two provisions that are important for the trucking industry. One being to provide incentives to get drivers who are under 21 to drive across state lines, drive trucks across state lines. So that's something they're not allowed to do for the most part nationwide. And the other one would be to look to reform the Compliance Safety Accountability Program at the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration through a series of reports that eventually will lead to removing some of the public scores, the CSA safety scores, from public view. What are you hearing from observers of that provision?
So first of all, on the younger driver amendment, that has some considerable support in the Senate as well. So that will be interesting to see. Senate Commerce Committee Republican leaders in that committee have expressed support for giving a little bit more leeway to allow younger drivers to cross state lines.
And the Senate bill has a similar, not an identical provision, but a similar provision in that bill.
Exactly. So that's ground for some action in conference.
Exactly.
When it comes to compliance, safety, accountability, that is something that also the Senate has expressed great interest, or Senate Republican leadership has expressed great interest in modifying some of the provisions of that program. Remember that safety advocates are big supporters of compliance, safety, accountability because they say that while these percentile-based scores, which compare the safety ratings of certain categories of trucking compliance with trucking safety laws, while there's a lot of support from the safety community, the truck safety, some of those groups, trucking industry argues that those scores aren't accurate.
Yeah.
They're not based on data that's been proven, and so they want to see that taken out of the public view until there are certain modifications to the program that they believe will make it to the point that the scores are more reflective of a company's overall safety rating.
And in your conversations with FMCSA, what do they say to you about the scores?
So they say that those scores are based off of a lot of hard work and also, years of research, and that while they might not be perfect, they're indicative of how a trucking company performs compared to its peers. Now, as you know, that's very much up for debate in the industry. They believe that that is not the case, but at least from the federal agency point of view, they believe that the scores serve the public well, and it also serves the public for those scores to be out and viewable, to allow consumers to make choices about what companies they're involved in. But we have also seen that these scores, the trucking companies say it's raised their insurance premiums, that the scores can be used against them in court. And so there are very contentious arguments on both sides. And I think, removing the scores from public view from the perspective of some of these lawmakers might just be able to take some of that controversy away temporarily while they consider on the policy side what to do about it. But either way that this compliance, safety, accountability program goes in the highway bill is going to be a big upset to one side or another.
Yeah, and not only you and I, we're going to be paying close attention to that. And taking a step back, Kellie, the transportation leaders, Bill Schuster in the House, Senator Inhofe, the EPW committee, they've been very adamant about saying that this bill is going to get to Obama's desk by Thanksgiving. I've been covering transportation and I've been covering Congress for a while. To me, that seems very ambitious. The Highway Trust Fund authorization expires on November 20th, so they have a deadline that they're working with. That's my point of view. What's your perspective?
Well, the thing is that if the House and Senate don't come to agreement on a longer-term measure before the end of the year, we're looking at dealing with surface transportation reauthorization going into an election year, which nobody really wants to do because any number of controversial provisions could put their party on the spot. And so I think that getting something done by the end of the year, getting through that legislation, considering all of the politics involved with an election year, chances are better. Now, getting it done by Thanksgiving, I think that lawmakers are more hopeful and I think more active than they were since the last deadline when Congress extended transportation authorization to the end of July with the hopes of getting something done by the end of October. But again, we have a new speaker in the House, Paul Ryan.
Yep.
The bill contains, the Senate bill, which is being combined with the House, contains a provision to reauthorize the Export-Import Bank.
Yep.
Very controversial issue for conservatives. So there's a lot of hurdles, there's a lot of political hurdles that Paul Ryan, James Inhofe, Bill Schuster are all going to have to grapple with in order to advance something to the point that they can get it to the president's desk.
It's going to be very exciting, and we can't wait to see how it's treated on the floor. And to read Kellie's work, they can go to cq.com and check out ttnews.com for all the latest on the highway bill as well. Thank you.
Thanks so much.